Okay, so we have our chapter 10 discussion here. I'm Dexter Hansel again. We are examining a teaching contract and determining the specific reasons for dismissal as stated in this teaching contract. So I pulled up one from our school and I crossed off name and position just so we weren't giving up some confidentiality stuff. But in our school district anyways, ours is located in this fourth section here, and it says this contract may be canceled or amended by a majority of the members of the school board during the school year for any of the following reasons. Upon cancellation, termination, revocation, or suspension of the teacher's certificate by a state board of education, breach of any of the material provisions of this contract for any reason set forth in this contract, incompetency, neglect of duty, unprofessional conduct, insubordination, immorality, or physical or mental incapacity, cancellation or amendments under this contract shall be governed by the provisions.
So some of the things that we talked about, like with incompetency, we went over in our slides today, but if a teacher is failing to meet performance expectations or they're receiving poor evaluations, that's what that would fall under. And then we also talked about immorality in our slides today, and that was engaging in behavior that's unethical or inappropriate.
For insubordination, that falls in example like refusal to use the new curriculum, unprofessional or unethical behavior towards colleagues or administrations, or to refuse to follow school policies.
Another big reason that teachers can be dismissed in here is talking about immorality. Immorality is being a very poor example for students and violating particular community values that could be sexual misconduct, physical abuse, drug and alcohol abuse, theft. I know another big one that has went around is like getting DUIs. So that can be a reason for dismissal. It shows be a level of immorality.
I think the only one we didn't talk about was neglect of duty, which is basically if a teacher just fails to fulfill their responsibility, arriving late, not completing the work that they're supposed to be doing in school, ignoring the needs of what students have, those sort of things would fall under neglect of duty.
The one thing that we kind of talked about before we started here too is our school's teacher contract actually puts in here a clause that says physical or mental incapacity. And that wasn't something part of our slides, but I don't know what your guys' thoughts on there, but that's kind of interesting that the physical or mental incapacity. So determining what justifies that, because like obviously being in a wheelchair shouldn't justify that, but being in a coma, I mean, where you are mentally incapacitated, where you're in a hospital, like, are we terminating contracts there then? Like,
I also kind of thought about how, like, does that fall under like the medical needs of things or health conditions, or does that stay only on one side? I thought about that also.
I did have a situation where one of our teammates fell into a coma for about a year, and I don't know the logistics of his contract, but he didn't go for a year to work, and then he was substituted. There was a long-term sub, but then when he got better, he came back to the position. So I'm not sure that they terminated his contract. But then again, the mental and physical incapacity is not in our contract.
Gotcha. I always look at this and I always think as from a teacher's perspective, it's like as long as you're doing your job, you really don't have a lot to worry about here. It's for when there's like complete refusal to do their jobs as administrators, we have to really look at this and say we're not doing our students justice because we have either incompetent teachers or teachers that are refusing to put forth the practices that we're trying to instill to help our students. Those are going to be the main two, I think, that get used quite frequently is incompetence and neglect of duty. Hopefully we don't have to deal with unprofessional conduct. Those are the ones that kind of scare me because there's a lot of that. where that fine line, like it doesn't uphold the community values, but maybe in another school district, you've heard of teachers that maybe get reprimanded but don't get fired for that same reason. Um, and then the last part that we have here is we are going to compare and contrast terminating a teacher for the reasons we just talked about, to a district's reduction in force policy. And one of the reasons for dismissal is stated in the teaching contract.
We kind of talked about reduction in force as being something that the district doesn't have a lot of control over normally, whether it's budget cuts or enrollments going down, or I think we also talked about buildings closing and merging in our other video. All of those things might be reduction in force, where it's not necessarily the teacher's fault or their performance or anything, but things that the district has to do.
So I kind of mentioned this in our presentation too, but I had a friend that got rifted, and it was nothing of his teaching ability. But the other thing that came up of that was like you get put on a list for like teacher candidates, and that school district, if they try to hire again and you're qualified for that job, part of the RIF process is you are eligible for that job first before they hire anyone outside. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. Like this procedure is, like Tristan said, is mainly used for financial reasons, not for incompetent teacher reasons. The book talks about some reasons that, or some policy ways that of RIF uses to decide like which teachers get rifted, and that was mainly had to do with time. So like experience. What were some of the other ones that we talked about?
Levels of education, how long they've held their education degrees for, um, years within their position in the building, how long they've been teaching in general, all those sort of things went into who would get um, cut first versus who would stay longer in that process of things.
In subject matter, I know some budget cuts definitely cut out the specials classes in some elementary schools. Those are the first to go.
So pretty clear here that reduction in force is not the same as terminating a teacher for just cause. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. You guys got anything else to add? All right. Thank you.